Heyo people, Crash Thompson here. So if you're seeing this video, obviously, thank you very much for being a part of the Patreon. This is a Patreon exclusive, and this one's a little different, I don't know, considering the circumstances that happened this year. As a result of what happened to me around August, September, when my schedule just became unbearably busy. It's still pretty busy even as it is. But as a result of all that, yeah, there were a lot of albums I never got a chance to touch, either in a review, a FIMI, just, I don't know, I ended up missing a lot, especially towards the last half of the year. But I did keep an active list of albums, and I did try to listen to music when I at least had the chance to do that much, and I still was able to catch a decent amount of stuff, even though I couldn't talk about a lot of it. But as a result, that means I missed out on dropping my thoughts on a lot of albums, and anything that didn't end up on the worst or the best list, or the list, I guess, but nobody wants to see anything pop up there. I just didn't get a chance to talk about a lot of albums here, so I picked 10 big ones, 10 albums I heard other people ask me about, or just 10 albums that just sparked my interest for whatever reason. No order with these. There's not like a, I don't know, there's not like a whatever this video is of the year or whatever. I don't know, this is just a grab bag of 10 albums and my thoughts on them. Enjoy. You know, I do got to admit, I liked this one a lot more than Sour. Sour, I don't know, it's such a lurchy album. Like, it's got Good For You, and it's got like one or two other songs that are good for you-ish, but it's mostly just ballads and piano stuff and that overwrought kind of, you know, I'm 16 and I just figured out what depression is kind of things. I'm not trying to be too mean on that record, but I don't know, it needed more energy, it needed more kick. It didn't need 5 copies of fucking Driver's License. And to be fair, Guts did fix a lot of that. It's a lot rockier, it has a lot more energy. On the whole, I really did enjoy it. Hell, the moments where this album was great, it was really, really good. I will admit, this did come close to making the besties. At least in an honorable mention, it was a contender. But even still, it was a contender for the bottom ranks of the list. It was a contender for an honorable mention spot. And the big reason is, man, she hasn't completely thrown off the shackles of that, has she? While it had more energy and it had more songs that kicked ass, she did listen to feedback from the last record. It's still got just like one or two too many mushy, overwrought, nothing piano ballads on it. It's still got the same problems as the last record. It's just gotten much less of that same problem, but she still hasn't completely fixed it. Didn't like it quite enough. Well, there were 30 other albums I liked better at the end of the day, so I will admit, just barely did miss out on that. I did enjoy it. And I think the next record, if she keeps building off of it and keeps improving, I think that third record will be very, very interesting to see. I'm looking forward to that, and I do see a lot of potential in Olivia Rodrigo. I think I'm on the Olivia bandwagon. I'm this close to being on the Olivia train. I just need, just give me one consistent album. You know, not a handful of really good singles. Just give me one good album that's bangers back to front, and I think I'll get there. You know, I dreaded what this thing was going to be, especially after those first handful of singles came out. I really didn't know what to think about this one at first, y'all. But having heard it a few times now, you know, it's not that bad. I wouldn't say it's great. It's far from their best records. But is it like offensive? Is it like bad? Not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Again, I gotta give credit where it's due. I don't know, it's another situation where when the album is working, it does work pretty well. The guys do still have a decent idea of how to arrange Blink songs and how to write Blink songs in a way that works. I mean, does the whole we're immature pop punkers thing get more and more icky and desperate looking the older you get? Sure. I don't know, this didn't end up being that bad, but I will admit the singles do still suck. And this album, this might have been more of a contestant for a dishonorable mention, if I'm being honest, because, okay, you know how on the Menzingers album, I really enjoyed, and that was a contentious album too, because apparently, their fan base really bit back against that record. I've heard a lot of dyed-in-the-wool Menzingers fans actually talk shit about that record. I don't know, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Menzingers fan. I thought it was great. But that album is also about getting old and kind of not knowing what to do with yourself. This record also is about getting old in a way, but I don't know, Blink-182's answer seems to be just wallow in nostalgia, wallow in the good old days. Just mention, hey, let's put out a song that's nothing but name drops and references to all our other shit. Hey, let's talk about let's roll in nostalgia. This album has way too many let's hug the teddy bear of nostalgia so we don't feel old anymore kind of moments in it. That was like the opposite side of that Menzingers coin. It was like, the Menzingers album made me feel old, but like realize, you know, it's growing up. It's a part of life. Listening to this album made me realize, man, I'm getting old and I am way too old for this shit. And they're too old to be doing this shit. But I didn't feel like it deserved a best spot because, again, there were enough decent songs and enough decent moments on it. I don't know, I couldn't hate it. It was not nearly as bad as I was expecting it to be, so kudos. Still not one of their better albums, though. Just laying that out there. Man, I think I mentioned this album a couple of times across both videos, didn't I? But yeah, that new Slowdive. I gotta admit, I did really enjoy it. Again, the dream pop kick that I've been on here lately. No, man, again, I really, really liked this one. This was also a contestant for a potential honorable mention. And honestly, I think I ended up leaving this one off the list because when I was weaning down the metric fuck ton of synthwave or otherwise electronic adjacent albums I had on my countdown, I kept going back to this record, enjoying like the first 3 songs, and then kind of getting my fill of it and saying, yeah, I like this, but what else have I got? I've got Nuevo Testamento, I've got Corinne, I've got all of this other stuff, Call Me Nuts, but I don't, it's a good record, but I didn't have room for it when there's so much other good stuff out there. Just, I don't know. Ooh, speaking of opinions that tend to get me into trouble, it's fine, you know? I don't dislike Jeff Rosenstock's work. I generally do like his stuff, but I don't love Jeff Rosenstock. I've never loved Jeff Rosenstock. I don't know why it's never clicked for me. I have had so many people just straight up tell me, Crash, this should click for you. This is you music. When I listen to this music, I think of you. I'm not entirely sure how to take that personally. But like, how many times have I talked about Jeff Rosenstock on this channel? And every single time it's the same conversation. It doesn't click. I don't get it, or it just doesn't work for me. The only Jeff Rosenstock album that's ever come close to working for me was that ska record, and that was a great big old shitpost, so I don't know. Especially when Melon made this his album of the year, I was like, oh god, I'm never gonna hear the end of this, am I? No disrespect to Melon, no disrespect to Jeff Rosenstock. It's a good album for what it is. I don't know, I'm not the guy to ask, but I'd say maybe it's his best record to date. I don't know, again, this guy is just not for me, people, okay? But I don't know, I wasn't even giving it any consideration for any list, really, because, again, I just had the same reaction. It's like, this is nice, but I think I'd rather be listening to almost anything else that doesn't suck. Not that this sucks, but I'd rather be listening to something else that doesn't suck. I just don't have any reaction to this. I'm sorry, folks. That reaction you want me to have, I don't know, Sleep Token eventually clicked. Maybe it'll click for Jeff Rosenstock someday. I'll keep listening to the guy, and maybe we'll see if it ever works, but I wouldn't put money on it if I were you. You know, I'm glad I got to at least mention this one briefly in the best video because, you know, I did enjoy this. Like, it is a hell of an artistic statement. I really respect the level of musicianship and the strong construction behind a lot of these tracks. Like, man, once you're able to nestle in and kind of get what they're trying to do, ooh, man, they do it very, very well. I was honestly impressed with this. But, yeah, it's also got my two biggest kryptonites. It's super noisy and super kind of amelodic. It ain't got them tunes. It ain't got like tunes. So I don't know. I'm a bitch baby if it don't got a tune. You know how I be. But it also had my second biggest weakness. It's just too long. It's noisy, it's atonal, and it's long as hell. It never had a chance, honestly. But you know, I did want to mention that I did enjoy this album more than I thought I was going to, and it was something I found myself coming back to from time to time. I often came back to it and said, okay, that's a little much for right now, but I think on the whole, I enjoyed it a lot more than I had trouble with it, which is, you know, maybe a sign that that genre is finally beginning to click. Maybe, eventually. I don't know, recommend some Swans albums that'll make me understand this. I figured I'd throw it out here, like, I did enjoy this. I did enjoy this. It is pretty decent for what it is, even though I don't love it. But that definitely feels like it's more of a me thing, not a them thing. Shame they broke up, or else I'd have definitely been paying attention to their last record. I guess I'll dig into that back catalog and see how I survive. Just kind of a great big old nothing record, really. Just like a big old plate of nothing here. It was another record that took a few listens for it to grow on me. I don't know, it's a bit different even for a Panopticon record. It's still got that interesting mix of bluegrass and black metal that feels like it shouldn't work, but oftentimes they're able to mesh the two together in weird, messy, but very interesting ways. I don't know, a lot of the mashups on this were just weird and messy without being all that interesting. It feels like it takes forever to get going. All of the songs are way longer than they need to be, and they're full of all these little moments and these little interludes. I don't know, the intro to the very first track on this album almost killed my interest in this album entirely. I had to look it up and say, okay, is this the same Panopticon who made the list with the last album they came on? And I was like, ooh, can't wait. Make a mental note of these guys, Crash, because their next record's probably going to be real interesting. Is this the same band? It's an album that's a bit sleepy, a bit dozy. It's kind of asleep at the wheel, but when it does wake up and grab the reins back, it still does interesting things, but like, ooh, yeah. Again, 2023 was the year to try new things, and even Panopticon was doing that. I would just say the stuff they tried didn't really work as well, necessarily. In my opinion, at least. I don't know. Again, another one that was kind of close. I really did end up liking this one. But I think I ended up liking this one more than a lot of my peers, to be honest, because this one, I think it might have been just because Scaring the Hose just threw us for a loop, you know? Him and Pecky get done releasing this bizarre, batshit, fucking goofy as hell thrill ride. And then, oh, hey, Danny's gonna put out a solo record too. All right, man, I love the energy you're on. I can't wait to hear more of this whacked out shit. Why is this album about being 40 and miserable? I almost might have cut this one from the list because I didn't want another album about growing old and having to deal with it being on my list. My list felt like it already had plenty of those on it. I don't know, it's another one of those records where I kind of have to wonder what it sounds like to folks who aren't kicking and screaming towards 40 like I am, you know? But yeah, and listening to it, it was very somber. It was very close to home in a way I wasn't exactly comfortable with in places. Yeah, it was a little dreary. It was a little uncomfortable to sit through in places. But again, Danny still has an exquisite ability to just put his feelings out on paper and honestly make them sound very convincing and raw and real. I don't know. Again, I think Scaring the Hose is just clashing with my perception of this album. Because again, we got the two biggest extremes from Danny this year. We got kooky, whackazade, fucking nutso, fun times, Danny Brown. And then we got Consequences, Danny Brown. Maybe if they hadn't come out in the same year, it would have been more easy to digest. But man, just, you can't scare the hose and then invite them back for a stern lecture. I don't know, the hoes were already scared, man. Whew. I liked this album more than most people did. That doesn't seem to be saying too much, though. I was so hyped after that mixtape, Demi Devil. I really thought Ashnikko was going to carry that energy over. So I walked into this record with Demi Devil in the back of my head, thinking it was going to be like fun and silly and goofy nanners. It very much wasn't. Separating myself from my previous perception of Ashnikko's body of work, it is a more interesting album than I think a lot of people gave her credit for, and I appreciate her making the statement now, saying, hey, I'm glad y'all liked Demi Devil, but I don't want to be pigeonholed. I don't want to lock myself into a box or this one little identity. I'm an artist capable of doing much more than just silly, goofy shit, so allow me to show you a realer side of myself, which I appreciated. But if the tunes had been there, it would have been much easier to swallow. Even I got to admit, I didn't like the album as much as I was hoping I was going to like it. But A, I think it's better than people are giving her credit for. And B, I still think Ashnikko is capable of putting out another really good record. I think she's still got it in her. I think she'll probably do better next time now that she's been able to learn a little bit from this experiment. Yeah, wanted to like this record, but it also needed to tunge. It just didn't have the tunge, is all. Speaking of expectations, on the whole, I did enjoy this record, but I also got to admit, this is not what I was expecting it to be. I don't know, all I heard walking into this record was, PJ Harvey's gonna put out something new. Oh, okay, great. I loved her stuff back in the 90s. I don't know, Fiona Apple also had that big resurgence here, and Liz Phair was kind of working off of that as well. Sure, let's bring all the 90s alt-pop girlies back out, shall we? Sure, PJ Harvey, loved your stuff. What else have you got? Why is this in Old English? Is this iambic pentameter? That's my fault for walking into this record without doing my research first. But yeah, no, this album had a very heavy and a very interesting approach to a concept. Again, it's a challenging listen, and it's a record that demands you put a little extra work into it, you know, do your research, figure out what she's trying to accomplish on this before you judge it. And yeah, on the whole, I appreciate this album for what it is, and I appreciate what she was trying to do with this, but again, it's interesting. It is a very interesting record, but it's not one I found myself coming back to necessarily. It's one of those records I'm glad it exists, and I'm glad she made it as like a statement and an attempt to sort of, again, bridge out as an artist, see what else you're capable of. But like, just raw, did I enjoy this? Did I come back to it? You know, is this an album of the year? I could see how it could be for some, but for me, I gotta be honest and say, nah, it was just, okay, you want a challenging record that did just kind of defeat me? You want a challenging record that I probably just didn't 100% get? Okay, this is that record. Okay, I might have spoke too soon. I honestly don't feel comfortable like reviewing it in any respect. I definitely would not have done this in like my typical reviewer style format. And in watching a lot of folks try to tackle this album in that format, I saw a lot of them struggling too. And yeah, as soon as I heard this, I was like, how the hell is anybody gonna like talk about this as like a fucking record? I guess the easiest way to put it is it's a piece of performance art. It is, I don't know, listening to just the record is not really the whole picture behind this album. Speaking as someone who saw this material debuted at Perpetual Flame live and in person, I felt like, yeah, I didn't quite know how to take this the first time I listened to it. But after hearing the record as like a whole, I sort of get it now. But here's the thing, y'all. This is not a record you grade on a scale and assign a silly number to and do a bunch of weird sketches. It's not the kind of album that, you know, loans itself to my review style of goofy cutaway gags and stupid references. And I don't know, man. It's not really a record you can write a lot of jokes around. At the end of the day, I've always been more of a comedian than a critic anyway, so I feel like just approaching this album with that kind of waka waka mentality is really doing it a disservice, and I just didn't want to. It's not so much that this one defeated me or that I didn't understand, at least to some degree, what she was trying to do. It's more just, I feel underqualified to talk about this. You know, even though I grew up in those kind of crazy religious environments, and I grew up around fundamentalism that did look at least adjacent to this. But, you know, I'm also a music critic. I'm not a performance art critic. And as music, well, again, it feels reductive to just talk about this project in terms of just music. So, I know this is probably sounds like a great big non-answer to a lot of memories, but it's like, I just felt like I just feel unqualified to discuss this, at the very least without great consideration and thought and a full understanding of the entire project and the scope she plans to execute this with. This was not a project you whip up a video on, so I didn't want to treat it with that kind of disrespect. I'll listen to other people talk about this record. How about that? I would much rather hear y'all's thoughts on this record than just spew my own out there, because I don't even know if my thoughts are fully developed yet. It's one of those records, y'all. This was a challenging record. Life is But a Dream was too challenging for you. Oh, that's the funniest shit I've heard all year. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Also, be sure to check out the Top 10 Is videos, also on Patreon. And thanks again, y'all. Never know quite how to end these, so